Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Buddhist Insights. Well, virtually anyway. So here at the Buddhist Insights Network tonight, we're going to be chanting the Ratana Sutta. And after chanting the Ratana Sutta, we have monk chat. So the wonderful and valuable opportunity to chat with monks. Since most of you are in fact not monks, so those of us who are monks, we can just talk to ourselves, but you have to actually talk to other people in order to have monk chat. So that's what we're here for, to provide you with this rare and valuable and precious opportunity, which occurs only once in hundreds of millions of lifetimes. So a precious, valuable opportunity. So hello to all the friends checking in. Hello, Elaine, Gita, Gabriella, James, Priya, Liz, Jens, and Adriana. Welcome, everyone. Happy to see you here. So once again, we'll start with chanting the Ratana Sutta, and you can find the link there. So please join in or listen attentively if that's what you prefer. Hello, Sally, as well. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Yani Putani samagatani bhummani vayani vantaleke. Sabe bhuta sumana bhavantu atopi saka chasunantu basitang. Tasmahi bhutani sameta sabe metang karota manusiya pajaya. Devacharato chaharanti eva ling tasmahine rakata apamata. Yan kinchi vitang edavahurang vasage suvayang ratanang panitang. Nano samang atitathagathena idampi buddhe ratanang panitang. Etena sachena suvati hotu. Kayang viragang amatang panitang yadanjagasa kyamuni samahito. Natena dhammena samati kinchi edampi dhamme ratanang panitang. Etena sachena suvati hotu. Yang buddha seto parivannai suching samadhi manantari kanyamahu. Samadhinatena samona vijjati dampi dhamme ratanang panitang. Etena sachena suvati hotu. Ye pungala tasatang pasatha chatari etani yugani honti. Te dakineya sugata sasavaka te sudinani mahapalani. Idampi sanghe ratanang panitang etena sachena suvati hotu. Ye supayutta manasa dalhena nekamino gotamasasanam hi. Te patipata matang vigaiha ladhamutanim buddhing punjamana. Idampi sanghe ratanang panitang etena sachena suvati hotu. Yatinda kilo pataving sito siya chatu pivate biyasampakampiyo. Tatu pamang samburisang vadami yo arya sachani avecha pasati. Idampi Sanghe Ratanang Panitang Etena Sachena Suvati Hotu Ye Arya Sachani Vibhavayanti Gambhira Panyena Sudesitani Kinchapi te honti pusapamata te bhavanga tamanga diyanti Idampi Sanghe Ratanang Panitang Etena Sachena Suvati Hotu Sahava Sadasana Sampadaya Jaya Sudhamma Jahita Bhavanti Sakaya Deti Vichike Chitancha Silambatang Vapiyadati Kinchi
Chatu
Papaye Chavipamuto Chachapitanani Abambo Katung Idampi Sanghe Ratanang Panitang Etena Sachena Suvati Hotu Kinchapi Sokam Karoti Papakang Kayena Vacha Udacheta Sava Avambo Sota Sapati Chadaya Avamata Deta Padasavuta Idampi Sanghe Ratanang Panitang Etena Sachena Suvati Hotu Vanapagumbe Yata Pusitange Gimanamase Patamasming Gimhe Tatupamang Dhammabarangade Sai Nibbanagaming Maramangiraya Idampi Buddhe Ratanang Panitang Etena Sachena Suvati Hotu Varo Varanyo Varado Varaharo Anuttaro Dhammavarangade Sai Idampi Buddhe Ratanang Panitang Etena Sachena Suvati Hotu Kinang Puranang Navang Nati Sambhavang Virata Chitta Yatike Bhavasming Tekina Bija Virulhin Chanda Nimbanti Dhira Yatayang Paripo Idampi Sanghe Ratanang Panitang Etena Sachena Suvati Hotu
Yani da
Bhutani Samagatani Bhummani Vayani Vantaleke Tathagatam Deva Manusa Pujitang Buddhang Namasama Suvati Hotu Yani Bhutani Samagatani Bhummani Vayani Vantaleke Tathagatam Deva Manusa Pujitang Dhammang Namasama Suvati Hotu Yani Bhutani Samagatani Bhummani Vayani Vantaleke Tathagatam Deva Manusa Pujitang Sanghang Namasama Suvati Hotu Etena Sacha Vanjena Dukavo Pasamentu Te Etena Sacha Vanjena Bhayavo Pasamentu Te Etena Sacha Vanjena Rogavo Pasamentu Te. Okay, that was lovely. And there's no comments or questions currently entered, so we'll go ahead and start with some meditation. And then we'll start taking whatever questions you might have. So please go ahead and get in a meditation posture, and we'll do just a short period of meditation. So sitting up nice and straight, taking a few deep breaths. With each breath, letting the body and mind relax. For the moment, there's nothing to think about, there's nothing to worry about, there's nothing to plan, nothing to seek, nothing to avoid. For now, we can just practice relaxing the body and mind, settling into a state of alert relaxation. Letting a slight smile form on our lips. And into this alert relaxation, gently introduce the phrase, may everyone be happy. May everyone be happy. May everyone be happy. So filling the mind with this gentle, loving benevolence. May everyone be happy. May everyone be happy. Feeling the bright, warm, soothing light of loving kindness, illuminating your whole being. Softening, gladdening your whole being as you continue to wish, may everyone be happy. May everyone be happy. May everyone be happy. Keep building up that feeling of gentleness, benevolence, loving, friendliness. May everyone be happy. May everyone be happy. May everyone be happy. Okay, you can relax your posture. And at this time, if you have any questions or anything you would like us to discuss, this is Monk Chat, so it's your opportunity to bring up whatever topics you like, as long as they're at least vaguely related to Buddhism. And the two of us will answer them to the extent of our abilities. So hello to some more friends joining in. Hello, Gita Ratnayake. Hello, Reed. Hello, Anat. And hello, AP. So starting at the top, James asks, what kind of visualizations help with each of the Brahmaviharas to generate their respective temporary liberations? Well, with using visualizations to support Brahmavihara practice, it's the results that matter. So we're trying to produce the Brahmavihara. So like just now we were doing loving kindness meditation, so trying to produce metta. So any visualization which helps produce metta. is going to be appropriate. So one person I know likes to start metta meditation by visualizing friends and family members and imagining himself giving them gifts and them getting happy. And that feeling then of making them happy by giving them gifts that they want. So that helps him get in touch with what this feeling of metta is, what it's like to just want people to be happy. And so then he can get into that wishing for people to be happy and start to produce the feeling of metta. So that's an example of a creative visualization that someone came up with in order to help with Brahmavihara meditation. So really, it doesn't matter exactly what the visual is as long as it works. A very common one that many teachers recommend, though I don't do this one myself, is to visualize bright, warm, soothing golden light radiating from your heart out in all directions. I've never personally been a big fan of that, but some people find it really helps them with cultivating metta. Or visualizing people happy and smiling, sometimes that helps. Or if there's a person who, whenever you think of them, metta arises naturally, then you can visualize that person. So be creative. Think to yourself, what visualization would help produce the feeling of metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, depending on what you're doing. So it's not the visual itself that matters, it's the result. And eventually you drop the visualization and you just focus on the Brahmavihara itself. The visualization is just a tool to help you get going. It's not meant to be the whole method. It's just meant to be a way of priming the mind, getting the mind going. Do you have any thoughts?
No, nothing.
Okay.
Good. And Gabriela is asking, I've been working on insight practice and discovered a lot of important insights behind what is a deeply loaded fault-finding and comparative mind. What can I do to counter these toxic mind states? Well, first of all, to accept things as they are is the number one thing. So not to start hating the kind of uncomfortable discoveries that we're doing, but rather just, kind of like when we see a stained floor, we don't feel too personal about it. We just go, okay, well, there's a stain and let me do something about it and clean the floor. Perhaps you need to Google the instructions if it's like a particular type of floor, or if it's a particular type of cloth. There's no reason to get upset about it. You just go, okay, well, this is the situation. Let me be proactive about it. So after practicing the stage, after you're comfortable with the stage of acceptance and not of hatred, of self-hatred, but of self-acceptance, then starting to evaluate, getting acquainted with these mind states. So see, what are the results? Whenever you start comparing yourself to others, what is the result? What is the kind of connotation, the quality of the mind? Is it leaning towards suffering or is it leaning towards non-suffering? And you'll see that it's obviously leaning towards suffering, but not on a conceptual level. So on a conceptual level, we all know, oh, that is bad and that is good and that is bad and that is good. So not thinking of, okay, I'm not supposed to be thinking, I'm not supposed to be comparing myself to Bhante. So bad Aya if you're comparing yourself to Bhante. So in that way, we're not actually making any progress. But if I go and sit down and go, okay, does it feel to compare myself to Bhante? That it makes me really suffer. It's really unwholesome. How about instead of comparing myself to Bhante, I feel mudita for Bhante? So if he's, for example, giving a better answer than me in Dharma, instead of like going, oh, he's much better than me, or if he gives a worse answer than me, oh, I'm much better. I've got this part. He doesn't believe that. See, he's got the comparative mind too. So instead of playing that game with yourself, really going, it's uncomfortable in one way or the other. The conceit of superiority is uncomfortable. The conceit of inferiority is uncomfortable. But mudita, that feels really great. Like, oh, wow, that's lovely that Bhante is giving a great answer of Dharma. It's so great that he's helping so many people. It's so great that people are receiving benefit in the teachings of the Buddha. Just even like reflecting that way, as I am telling you, the mind gets uplifted. And you can see the qualitative element of your experience. Qualitatively, not intellectually, qualitatively. And then you're like, yes, this is worth pursuing, and that is not worth pursuing. So always coming back to your experience, not to what you think your experience should be, not what you think you should be thinking, but rather cultivating a deliciousness, cultivating, like in Italian you say acquolina in bocca, like water in your mouth, like that. You're like, yes, I want to have that taste of mudita in my mind, instead of the taste of comparative and fault finding. I do it all the time. Just when you're an aversive type, your mind constantly looks and veers towards what is not that great in the experience that I'm having, and what is not that great in the people that I am relating to. So it's big practice for me as well. And the way that I make progress is once again in the same way. And also by actively trying to, during the pandemic it's a little bit different, but normally trying to surround myself with people who don't have aversive tendencies. That's also very helpful, because they will kind of be on the other way around. They will go like, oh, everything is so great and beautiful, there is nothing wrong. And you're like, there's lots of things wrong, but it just creates a sort of balance. So the person that is not aversive starts contemplating, the drawbacks of the experience, and the person who is only contemplating the drawbacks is starting to contemplate the gratification of the experience. And then both together, we go and help each other towards pointing our minds towards the escape of the experience.
Okay. And Gita asks, what is the difference between Vimutti-magga and Visuddhi-magga? Well, you're probably better off Googling that, to be perfectly honest, because I haven't spent much time going deeply into either book. I've read both of them, of course, but not for many years at this point. Vimutti-magga was probably written at about the same time as the Visuddhi-magga. So they were both written about 500 CE or so. I forget the exact date. It was about the same time. There is a fair amount of overlap in content. The Vimutti-magga is a bit more focused on meditation practice, whereas Visuddhi-magga is a bit more doctrinal, a bit more abstract, a bit more conceptual. But it's been too long since I've read them to clearly remember what distinguishes them and sets them apart. But if you look online, you can find scholars who have written detailed explanations of the differences and similarities between the two books. But yeah, I'm not the best person to ask. I was never terribly interested in either one. I do recall I liked Vimutti-magga. I liked a little bit more than Visuddhimagga. Visuddhimagga, I'm not a fan of. I don't particularly like it at all. It has some good things in it, but overall, I'm not terribly impressed by it. Vimutti-magga, I liked a little bit more, but I still wasn't a very big fan. I like suttas. I'm usually less interested in apocryphal works than I am in the suttas. Okay.
And I think that's for you, since you
I also do silent illumination practice. You can answer that, unless you really don't want to.
Let's see. In practicing silent illumination, I've been stuck with a ruminating back and forth between fear and daydreaming. How do I release the mind that ruminates on the future possibilities and past actions? Within silent illumination, I think you should answer.
Okay. Well, the most important thing is just not to take it personally. It's just part of the sensorium. It's just part of the phenomena that come and go. And as long as we don't get involved, then they have no power over us. As long as we don't take them seriously, as long as we don't take them personally, as long as we don't react to them, then they have no power over us. So actually, Dogen puts it very simply. He says, don't try to stop thinking, just practice non-thinking. In other words, you don't need to force the mind to stop producing mental objects. You just don't get involved in them. Don't take them seriously. Then there's no problem. Just see it as like weird noise. Kind of, this is showing my age a little bit, but when I was a kid, I remember analog radios where you actually had to turn a physical dial and it would move like a little indicator on an analog readout to show you what radio station it was showing.
Oh.
And as you were turning the dial and it was moving through radio stations, you would like pass through where it would be like barely picking up this hazy signal, and it would be like weird noise of people talking or like distorted bits of music, but it was stuff that you weren't interested in because you're just trying to get to the channel you want. Like you're trying to get to like channel 97.3, and as you pass through the 96s, then it produces this like weird distorted staticky noise of a bunch of nonsense that doesn't interest you. So you hear it, but you're not interested, so you don't, you just let it go past you without getting wrapped up in it. So it's like that, except that in silent illumination practice, you're not ever settling on any one channel. You just let it keep cycling through all the random noise, but without getting involved in any of the noise. And over time, the noise tends to become quieter, but we're not trying to make the noise go away. Rather, we're trying to change our perspective on the noise, of just seeing the noise as being a natural phenomenon which doesn't affect us, in which there's no reason whatsoever for us to react to it. So we're aware of it, but we don't react to it. So being aware of it is illumination. Not reacting to it is silence. So it's silent illumination. Okay?
And James is asking, which Brahma Vihara is most conducive to conflict resolution? My boss at work and I are not seeing eye to eye. It's always the same answer. Metta is always the answer. Yeah, it's so just mind-blowing how much difference it makes. Metta, whenever we have conflict and whenever we don't have conflict. And actually, we should probably work much more on whenever we don't have conflict in producing metta than when we have conflict. So then the latter will be easier. will be much easier. But yeah, because once you start really wishing for everyone to be happy, you start also seeing the silliness of the conflict. What is very helpful for me to reflect is also when other people, actually, like what you're doing right now, when you're bringing me your sort of story of having conflict with your boss, because it's very far from me. I can see like, oh, it's not a big deal. But then when it happens to me, there's like, that big, like feels really personal, even if it's something quite subtle. That's like not a big deal objectively, but we feel it quite strongly. So when I start contemplating in that way, I go like, okay, well, clearly it's not about the, whatever I'm dealing with, the sort of conflict that is coming into the mind. That's not the problem, but the problem is the approach. And in order to have a better relationship with what my experience is to practice metta on a daily basis. So constantly, really, really imbuing your mind of loving kindness and wishing for everyone to be happy. And it's incredible how others then start shifting, how they also, even if they are a little bit hostile, perhaps normally towards you, they start loosening up a little bit, because there's nothing to which the hostility starts can hold on to, because it kind of like everything. I'm a little tired, so I can't speak. Very tired, not a little. But yeah, it goes right through you. So you keep that mind of loving kindness, keep that mind of happiness, and the person starts softening up a little bit. So yeah, like for example, we had a few issues with one of the neighbors here, because the chickens like run into his garden and he's not particularly happy. This is long story short. And instead of getting irritated, really wishing for this person to be happy, really understanding what they're going through their perspective. And so we prepared a little gift bag and we brought it to to our neighbor, and it makes everyone happy. There's still a problem, but it's less prickly. So it makes everything better in our minds, better in his mind. Make everyone be happy, including the chickens.
Yeah, one thing I would also add to that is look for your own peace in the situation. Is it perhaps not 100% your boss's fault? Is it possibly that you were not very interested in the boss's viewpoint? It's quite possible that it's 95% the boss's problem, 95% that the boss doesn't want to see your perspective. That's possible. But look and see, are you actually interested in your boss's perspective? Actively cultivate a genuine willingness to hear your boss's perspective and to really try to understand it and try to feel it and really try to see it through his eyes. Because that might also be part of the problem. He might be hitting what to him feels like very strong resistance from you to seeing his point of view. So then naturally, he clamps down and puts up his walls and doesn't seem very interested in your viewpoint. Maybe that's what's going on. I'm not sure. But often I find that's a contributing factor in these sorts of situations. So AP says, I have been learning about kasina meditation, such as visualizing a candle flame in fire kasina. Is there an advantage in substituting anapanasati for one of the kasinas to reach samadhi and insight? Yes. Yes. So the emphasis on kasina meditation comes from the Visuddhimagga. The suttas mostly emphasize mindfulness of the body and mindfulness of breathing. It's only in the Visuddhimagga that one sees the emphasis placed on kasina practice. In the suttas, kasina practice is mentioned, but very rarely, only in a small handful of places, and it's not given any particular importance. And the Buddha doesn't describe it in any detail either. And the instructions that I've been given throughout my monastic life, I've actually never met a teacher who encouraged kasina practice. And the advice that I've gotten from every meditation teacher I've met was that it's much safer to use some kind of physical body awareness as the basis for samadhi. And samadhi, of course, is the basis for insight. And one of the main reasons for this is because when focusing on a mental object, such as a kasina, it's very easy to get lost in imagination. It's very easy to just drift off into a little world of our own inner creation, a little world in our own mind. And this is not remotely helpful to Buddhist practice, to get lost in our imagination. Whereas if we're using a physical sensation, a physical experience as our primary meditation method, then we're much less likely to get lost in imagination, because it helps anchor us in consensus experience. It helps anchor us in what seems to be reality. So that's one of the main reasons why Anapanasati or Kayagattasati is commonly recommended as samadhi, as one samadhi object. It helps keep you grounded, so that you're less likely to drift off into imagination, less likely to get lost in your mind. Okay.
Right, and Mark is asking, previously I asked you, I think he's referring to you, Bante, about karma, and that only 1 in 8 belong to us, and you said this was highly misunderstood. Did you answer this and I missed it? Could you comment on this?
So I think you're referring to a sutta where a Brahmin asked the Buddha about sickness in specific. So this sutta, it's a case where a Brahmin asked the Buddha, is all sickness directly caused by karma? And the Buddha says no. He says that there are 8 reasons why one might experience illness or sickness. And so the first 7 are ordinary things like disease or bad food or bad weather and so on. So pretty ordinary things. And he says the 8th possible reason is karma. So it might be the direct result of karma. So my understanding of this sutta is that the Buddha is not saying that the other cases of illness are not caused by karma, but rather that the cause is indirect rather than direct. So so in the case of, for example, painful sensations or afflictions caused by disease, you might say, well, that's not the direct result of karma because it's coming from the disease. Well, that's true, but why did you get the disease in the first place? Why were you born in a body that's subject to disease? Because of karma, of course. There are states of being where one does not experience disease, such as all the devas, but also some parts of human experience. There's no disease. This is mentioned in a few places in the suttas. Also, some people just never seem to get sick the whole life. They just never seem to get sick. Well, that's also karma. That the result of karma is that they're not getting sick ever. So in that case, it's not the direct cause. The painful affliction is not directly caused by karma, but it's indirectly caused. So that's my understanding of what the Buddha is talking about in that case. But then the sutta gets used by some people, not everyone, but some people use the sutta to try to prop up this idea that not everything is karma, that most of what we experience is just random, chaotic happenings which are completely unrelated to karma. But I don't see this as being at all what the Buddha was saying. And in fact, it utterly demolishes the whole Buddhist worldview when one starts chopping up karma and saying, oh, karma only applies in a little tiny field of experience and everything else is chaos. Well, no, that's not what the Buddha says at all. No, the Buddha lays out the causal arising of phenomena. That phenomena appear because of causes and conditions. That nothing appears without a cause. This is what the Buddha talks about. So idappaccayata, which is conditionality, specific conditionality. When this exists, that exists. When this does not exist, that does not exist. So specific conditionality, idappaccayata. And paticca samuppada, which is dependent arising. So based on this, that arises. Based on that, the next thing arises. Based on the next thing, the following thing arises. So it's this causal chain of conditional arisings. This is what the Buddha describes. He does not describe a chaotic random universe. He describes a very orderly clockwork universe in which we have the ability to make choices which create consequences. But the unfolding of those consequences is orderly, clockwork, causes and conditions. So again, when one takes that sutta in the context of all the other suttas, it's quite clear that the Buddha is not discarding karma or limiting karma, but rather he's distinguishing between direct result of karma and indirect result of karma. Everything else in the suttas makes it completely clear that the universe is causal. The universe runs on cause and effect, which is what karma is. Karma just means, it's just causality. That's all it is. So those are my thoughts on the subject. We could look at the sutta one of these days, but it's not really anything beyond what I've just said. So I'm not really sure it's necessary spending a whole morning going through it. Okay.
And Sally says, how could people overcome the fear towards the virus nowadays? I noticed the reopening trends have heard persistent terrible after effects even after recovering from the COVID virus. Bless everyone, be well. Well, overcoming the fear of the virus is recollecting that we're of the nature to get ill and recollecting that we're of the nature to die. And recollecting that everything that we love and care will be separated from us. And recollecting that we are the owners of our karma, the heirs of our karma. We can't escape our karma. So that's why the Buddha tells us to recollect this daily. So then we're not afraid of it anymore. We just really, truly understand that this is our nature. It's not something that is far away. It's not something that has, to do with the virus per se. We can die every moment. We can die, we can get ill in every moment, whether there is a pandemic or there's not a pandemic. So it's just that right now, there's lots of people at the same time getting sick with the same disease. But other times, it's just the same nature. So truly recollecting that and facing our own fears. So the Dhamma is about practicing the Dhamma is about seeing how things are. And how things are is that we are of the nature to get ill and we're of the nature to die. So we need to understand this. And then actually there's joy that comes from this. It's not something that depresses us. What is depressing is the fear of something inevitable. Because either we pretend that it doesn't exist, which creates even more delusion, propensity on not understanding anything about our experience and suffering and suffering and suffering even more. Or it brings to shock or terror or fear or all these different anxiety, all these different types of emotions. But if you actually see something for what it is, then you're not afraid of it anymore. You're just acceptant of it. Like a friend of mine, for example, when he was diagnosed many years ago with HIV, it was shocking for him. We were all upset, distressed. He's been living a totally okay life. Haven't seen him in quite some time. Why is he okay and not still in distress? Because he actually fully accepted that that is the sort of situation. That is what is there. Why was there so much suffering back then? Because it was a shock. It was something that he wasn't seeing, perceiving, thinking that could never happen to us. But we are always getting sick. Everybody's always getting, there's always people dying. Why do we think that we don't have that nature? So think of what I did in terms of this pandemic, actually, was I just convinced myself that I already have the virus. It's really great actually to okay, I have it. So then what I should watch is in terms of protecting others, for example, from the contagion. Yeah, so thinking about how to not spread it to others. And also going, okay, well, these are all the symptoms that could happen with the escalation of the virus. And it's okay. When it will happen, it will happen. If it won't happen, that's fine. It's still not the right time. Just accepting whatever it is. It always has worked in the past also. I do it with anything that is scary. I pretend that it's already happening. Yeah. Before becoming a citizen at a certain point, when there were all the crazy things about people with green cards and getting repelled the green cards a couple of years ago or whatever, I was like, okay, well, they're just going to take my green card away. It's fine. It's okay. It has happened already. And then you transcend it because you're okay with the sort of turmoil, or when you think you've lost something, same thing. So many times since I was a little child, I would constantly have this fear. What happened to something that I really cared about? And then it occurred to me, well, the more I'm attached to this thing, the more it will suffer. So I'll just pretend that it's lost already. So then if I would find it again, I would be happy. But if not, it was fine. So any single thing, just pretend it's, as Ajahn Chah actually says, it's already broken. So your body's already broken. You already have the virus. Whatever happens to you, if you think you're losing your job, you already lost your job. If you start thinking that way, freedom from suffering. Because you're okay, there's nothing else to lose.
And Sally asks, as of Bante's answer to silent illumination, how could we not react to thinking or decision that's really going to impact one's life, or the objects we really consider as serious or really important? Well, during the course of doing the meditation, then those things are not important because they don't have any relevance at that time. So if something keeps popping up and you seem to think it's really important, really serious, then you can just gently tell yourself, not right now. Not now. Or I'll take care of that later. Just gently telling yourself, not now. So acknowledging, yeah, that's important, but not now. Not now. And get back to the meditation. And it just ceases to be an issue. Because yes, this is important. I agree, it's important. And yes, I need to take care of it, but not now. I'll get to it later. After the meditation, then I can take care of those things, but not now. Okay?
And Liz is asking for a Sotapanna Sutta talk that has not happened yet. So yes, I put it on the list of things that we should actually discuss about. And Jan says, Venerables, I know this is different to each person, but what spiritual quality, Browny, have you found the most important in monastic life? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, so the very first one that comes to mind is equanimity.
Okay, me too.
Number 2 is patience. More than anything else, if you want to get through monastic life, you need equanimity and you need patience. More than anything else. You can have terrible samadhi, no shred of wisdom, but if you've got equanimity and patience, you can last. And eventually you'll get the samadhi and the wisdom. But if your equanimity is bad and your patience is weak, you're not going to last. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
What he said. And Garden says, I feel shame or guilt from crazy actions I've done recently in front of people who I care about. Now I have a fear of showing myself. Well, I would say that in these situations, we should take them as learning experiences. So you've done an unwholesome action, and the result immediate in your mind is of shame and guilt, 2 unwholesome mind states. So the result shouldn't be, now I go and hide myself from the world, but rather contemplate cause and effect. So you don't want an unwholesome effect. So in order to not have unwholesome effects, you need to change your actions. In order to change your actions, you need to purify your mind. So I would go, first of all, and ask and apologize to the people that you've hurt. Apologize also to yourself, and then forgive yourself. Whether or not the people that you've hurt are forgiving you, you can forgive yourself and start from scratch and go, okay, well, I'm not going to repeat those actions, so I'm going to train my mind. What does the Buddha have to say about that? How can I train my mind? Well, the Buddha has a lot of good things to say about that. It's called the Noble Eightfold Path. So you can commit yourself to the practice. Once again, forgive yourself and do something positive. Do something useful. Do something that creates the conditions for wholesome actions to happen in the future instead of repeating the same pattern. Because if you go into hiding now, then you're just going to repeat the same thing over and over again, over and over again. And hiding places are not eternal and infinite. There's only a few left, so you're going to run out of them very soon. Do you want to add anything?
No, that's good. Then Victor says, I have a question. I have a client that works as an in vitro lab technician. Her question is what Buddhists think when she has to clear unused embryo, because that is part of her work. Is she killing living beings or not? she is atheist. This is the reason I asked you last time about embryo. Well, first off, if she's atheist, then I don't really understand why she's the least bit interested in this subject, because it seems like it doesn't apply to her. If somebody is atheist, then why would they care the slightest bit what different religions think about what they're doing? So that's my first thing. I'm curious. Why does she care what the Buddhists think about what she's doing? Though, coming to the question, as we said last time, it does not specifically state anywhere in the Pali Canon that I'm aware of, it does not specifically state when a fetus becomes sentient, when consciousness arises in a fetus. It does not say. So whether it happens at conception or sometime after conception, or how long after conception, this just isn't answered anywhere in the Pali Suttas. So there's a lot of speculation that people have done over the last 2,500 years, but speculation is just speculation. So I don't have a personal opinion on the subject. And I'm not comfortable going into speculation, because that's a very, very dangerous minefield to walk through. Especially when dealing with someone like this who, it sounds to me like idle curiosity, like an atheist who's just idly curious about this. If she was herself a Buddhist practitioner and she was feeling conscience stricken, then I would probably recommend that she change her job. If for no other reason than because she's feeling conscience stricken. And that's going to affect her state of mind. So whether it's morally wrong or not, that's a much more complicated question with no clear answer that I know of from the Buddhist texts. But once again, to someone who's an atheist, it just seems beside the point. So I don't understand why this person is even asking. Okay.
And Grant is asking, regarding a meditation practice like Satipatthana, should I try to not mentally say what I'm doing or going to do, or does it not matter? Going over the skin, flesh, bones, mindfulness, etc. Do you want to answer this?
Okay. Generally speaking, using verbal thinking is not recommended in meditation practice, except in the early stages as a way of helping you get in the right direction. So what we're trying to do is to get a direct feeling, a direct, tangible experience of the meditation. So verbal thinking can be used to help point your mind in the right direction, but it's actually going in the right direction that's important. So an example of this is that if you ask somebody, how do I get to the park? And they tell you, oh, well, go 3 blocks west. And you just sit there repeating to yourself, go 3 blocks west, go 3 blocks west, go 3 blocks west. And you just keep telling yourself that over and over again. You're never going to get to the park. You're just going to sit there telling yourself, go 3 blocks west over and over again. But if you tell yourself, go 3 blocks west, and then you start walking west, and you keep reminding yourself, 3 blocks west, 3 blocks west, 3 blocks west, then eventually you'll arrive at the park. And when you arrive at the park, then you can stop telling yourself, go 3 blocks west, because you're already there. So the telling yourself is no longer applicable at that point. So similarly, you might tell yourself at the beginning, well, like we were doing in the loving kindness meditation, we tell ourselves, may everyone be happy. That's to remind ourselves to produce the feeling of metta, the attitude of metta, the mind state of metta. But the actual meditation is the mind state of loving kindness. It's not the words. So eventually you stop using the words and you just focus on the feeling itself. So it's the same with Satipatthana. You might tell yourself what the meditation is, but then you try to actually do the meditation wordlessly, non-verbally. Okay.
Right, and Garden is asking, can you give a brief description of the Noble Eightfold Path? Yes, very briefly. It's right view, so having an understanding of the teachings. So in other words, we can call it the map. So that gives us an idea of where we are and where we're supposed to go. Right intention, so the map gives us an idea of the direction. Right speech, so using words appropriately and beneficially instead of unbeneficially. Right actions, so what we do in everyday life, and right livelihood, which is obviously the way through which we survive in this world to begin with. So for the majority of people, it's their job. So there's an appropriate way of appropriate jobs, appropriate livelihoods, and inappropriate livelihoods. So basically, whatever harms other people is inappropriate, and whatever is beneficially for other people is appropriate. Then there is right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So that's the sort of meditation practice that we have to do as well. This is very long story short.
Okay, and then optimistically cynical, great name.
Yeah.
Says, I took son to the park, and when we got home, we found the goldfish dead, which is a tough situation for any parent. How do you explain this to a 4-year-old? At some point, you're going to have to explain to your child what death is. And you're going to have to explain to them that death is a natural part of life, that every body eventually dies. This is inescapable. It's just a fact of life. But that this isn't a problem. It's just a natural function. So bodies are born, they grow, they live for a while, they decay, and they die. That's just the nature of things. So it's not a problem unless we make it a problem. If we accept it as being an inevitable part of life, then there's no problem. And also, the Buddhist viewpoint is that we have lived countless lives before this one, and every one of those lives ended with death. So clearly death isn't such a big deal because it didn't stop us. We just found another form of life to live and lived another form of life for a while. So death is clearly not such a big deal. So the question rather than should be, how are we going to make our life meaningful while it lasts? How are we going to be using this life in the best way possible in order to develop wholesome mind states and wholesome qualities? So finding the goldfish dead is actually a great opportunity to introduce to your child the concept of death. The fact that death is inevitable, and it comes to all of us, but it's not a problem. It's just something that we need to learn how to be okay with. Okay?
Yeah, and Bradley is saying, we can experience things from hundreds of lifetimes ago, no? The cause has long since been forgotten. Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, even within this lifetime, actually, we can forget the causes of our actions. I mean, the causes of the experiences that we're having. So we have very short memory. So that's why also I think the Buddha suggested for us not to wrap up too much our heads in terms of understanding, trying to understand the implications of karma in the specific. So he says that our head will explode because of this, because we're, unenlightened. So we should focus on other things that are more useful. Like there is suffering, there is the cause of suffering, there is the cessation of suffering, and there's the way out of suffering. And Denise is asking, does nimitta arise in the mind when practicing all methods of samadhi? I can answer this if you want, or you can answer it.
Go for it.
So my understanding is that it's a little subjective. So meditation practice, the effects that we're going to have, or the experiences that we're going to have, it's not one size fits all because we have different karmic conditions. So I'll use perhaps an unorthodox analogy, but in psychedelics, for example, when people use psychedelics, normally you'll find two different types of reactions that people will have, of course, if they don't overdose with it. But normally there's either people who start seeing things, visualizing things, like people that take psychedelics and start visualizing dancing with the Roman, like in the Roman Empire time or something like that, or people who start having really introspective trips, existential questions and answers, and really like trippy things of that sort. So in terms of visuals, so the reason why I'm bringing up this analogy, I find it very kind of pertinent to the experiences that we have in samadhi, not necessarily will be visual for each individual or in each practice that you're doing, but it will show in a different way according to the practitioners.
Yeah.
Stamp of approval of Bhaktisiddhasa.
And Mark says, based on your understanding of the suttas, what do you think the Buddha would say about the fact that nearly all religions speak of God and Buddhism doesn't? Well, first off, I would say that your question is not quite accurate. First off, not nearly all religions speak about God. Second, different religions often speak about gods quite differently from each other. And third, it's not that Buddhism doesn't speak about gods. So what I would simply say is Buddhism talks about a whole variety of beings which are God-like, which have many God-like qualities, but that all of these beings are mortal and limited. So Buddhism does not talk about an immortal being. In fact, from a Buddhist perspective, nothing is immortal. No one is immortal. Every single being is mortal, including the highest gods. And also, every single being is limited. Every single being has some limit to its power, some limit to its ability to influence reality. So the concept of an omnipotent, immortal God doesn't fit in Buddhism. The closest you can get is the idea of Dharmakaya Buddha, but that's not the same. So one of these days we'll talk about it. It's on the list of talk subjects. The Dharmakaya Buddha, Sambhogakaya Buddha, and Nirmanakaya Buddha. So the three aspects of Buddha. So at that time I'll talk more about Dharmakaya Buddha. That's the closest you can get to the concept of an immortal, omnipotent God, but it isn't, as we'll see when we talk about that. It isn't. So Buddhism does actually talk about a lot of gods and goddesses, but it talks about them more like the Greek and Roman gods or the Norse gods. So gods who are more powerful than humans, who live longer lives than humans, but which are still mortal and which are not all powerful. They have limits. Yep.
All right. Oh, which one is next? Peng?
Yeah.
Are we progressing in our meditation when we have the experience where 8 hours of meditation in a single session feels like 30 minutes? Well, I guess yes, but the reason why I'm a little bit hesitant, it's more that I'm not a particular fan of that approach of like, oh, I meditated for 8 hours. I meditated for 12 hours. I meditate for 3 days nonstop. It's not really about the quantity, but the quality.
Mm.
So what are you doing during meditation practice? So better question would be if it feels like 30 minutes because there is a reason, because I am understanding something, because I'm overcoming certain mental hindrances or overcoming unwholesome desires, unwholesome thoughts. So becoming a better person. So that's where you actually see if you're making progress in your meditation, not necessarily in terms of like how long it feels, because, you know, sometimes one can like sleep for 8 hours straight and it feels like 30 minutes. During one retreat, actually, I was so exhausted that I remembered I learned how to sleep sitting down. And I was like, afterwards, I was like, I don't know if it's actually like something that it's actually an accomplishment. Do you see what I mean? But it felt like, you know, I could have like just sat here for ever. It felt like 2 minutes. But the defilements were still there. So really looking, evaluating your mind and seeing does the mind have less suffering? Is the mind more peaceful? Is the mind more full of loving kindness? Is the mind more stable, more mindful? So evaluating it in that way rather than in the time sitting. Because chickens, as Ajahn Chah was also used to say, you can see chickens sitting for hours and hours and hours and hours, but there ain't no chicken that is enlightened.
Okay, and Ethan says, do you have a favorite scene from the Pali Canon? Well, there's lots that I really like, but actually a couple that came immediately to mind, actually, two that came to immediately mind. First off, when the Buddha attained enlightenment, that's an old classic, quite like that. Another one I really like is shortly after he attained enlightenment, when he set out to start teaching and he met someone on the road. And there's this highly amusing exchange where the person says to the Buddha, like, oh, you look so radiant and magnificent, you're positively glowing. You must have had some deep spiritual experience. Who's your teacher? And the Buddha replies, I have no teacher. In a world of the blind, I am the only one who can see. I go now to beat the drum of the deathless. And the guy's just like, okay, whatever, psycho, bye, and walks off. So I find that highly amusing. I also feel kind of bad for the guy because he came face to face with a newly enlightened Buddha and just like totally blew his chance. So I feel kind of bad for the guy, but I still find the scene really amusing. So those are a couple of my personal favorites. Aya?
Well, I love the Bhikkhuni Soma Samyutta, which is why I get the name after her. But actually, I love the whole Bhikkhuni Samyutta. Like all the suttas there. It's just quite amusing how Mara disturbs the meditation of the practitioners, and they're all like, what's this? Mara, I see. Okay, talk to my hand.
Talk to my hand, Mara.
Yeah, I also find it quite amusing because on the flip side, the Bhikkhu Samyutta, it's actually like all these bhikkhus that are not terribly impressive. And the devas go and tell them, okay, come on, like really get it together. while the bhikkhu is slacking in the forest. So there's also like that kind of stark difference of uninspiring bhikkhus in the Bhikkhu Samyutta and super inspiring bhikkhunis in the Bhikkhuni Samyutta. Yeah, so I love that. But regardless of the gender thing, when I first read the Bhikkhuni Samyutta, I was just blown away. I loved it because each one is the same but different.
So Liz asks, is there any choice as to the conditions of one's rebirth prior to? For instance, does one choose one's family? So my understanding is that for the most part, we're not necessarily consciously choosing. We're just getting the results that arise naturally from our past karma. But there are some places in the suttas where the Buddha indicates that we do have some ability to influence the conditions of our future lives. So a classic example of this is the Sankharuppapatti Sutta, which is, I think Bhikkhu Bodhi translates it as rebirth by aspiration, which is a sutta where the Buddha talks about exactly that. Forming an intention to be reborn in a particular place or with particular conditions. And he clearly states in that sutta that you can. That if you have sufficient merit, then if you make a strong determination to have a particular kind of rebirth, then you can get it. It can be done. But yeah, most of the determining factors for the conditions in our future lives is, again, the mechanical consequence of our past choices. So we don't have much conscious influence over it. But we do have some. Which is why it's a common practice in Buddhism to regularly make the determination, may I always be reborn where I have access to the Dharma. May I always be reborn with the mind which is capable of understanding the Dharma. May I always be reborn with the enthusiasm to practice the Dharma, and so on. Because those do shape our mind and those do affect our future lives. Okay.
And Scott, welcome. Scott asks, what are monks specifically? And hi from Ireland. Hello from New Jersey, close to New York City. Although Bradley told us that it's not really outside of New York City, as we think it is. But it's close enough. And what are monks? Well, male monk, female monk. We have funny clothes on and we shave our heads.
Some of us a bit more often than others.
Touché. We are, well, there are different actually. I assume you're asking what are Buddhist monks or monks in general?
I think the person means Buddhist monks. So let's answer as though that's what they mean.
All right. So a Buddhist monk is someone who is dedicated to the teachings of the Buddha and is dedicated to practice fully and totally the teachings of the Buddha, of awakening, that lead to the cessation of suffering. So we practice the way that the Buddha of this sort of world system. So traditionally, we refer to whenever we talk about the current Buddha, we talk about Shakyamuni Buddha, who we have up here. And so we follow the forms, the precepts, like basically a sort of, help me with the word, sort of system that he has laid out.
System of training.
System of training, thank you very much. That he has laid out that allows us to practice in a way where we can see our mind clearly and we know what what to work with in order to make progress in the path. So that is, in essence, what Buddhist monastics are. So we take lots of different precepts through which we are makes us in complete dependence on lay people. So we take vows of poverty in Buddhism, and everything that our entire livelihood is based on the kind donations of lay people, so non-ordained people who decide to support our practice.
Okay.
So long story short.
Okay. And Bradley, this is the last question. Bradley asks, how do monastics decide whether to take on Dhutanga practices or not? And are there any you have or haven't tried, or would or wouldn't? Well, first off, the Dhutanga practices are ascetic practices which are meant to help deal with particular defilements. So usually one takes them on if one feels that one needs a little extra help with particular defilements. So some of them are related to food. So you might take those on if you have a lot of problems with attachment to food or craving for food, for example. Commonly, Dhutanga practices, you want to talk with your teacher first and check with him to see if it's really a good idea. Like at one point I had taken on some practices related to eating, and I went and I spoke to my preceptor, and he was just like, you're pretty thin. Maybe this isn't a great idea. Maybe we should be more practical about this. And I was like, okay, fair enough, fair enough. Also, it just wasn't really relevant to my defilements. Like, it's not my primary defilement, so it wasn't really relevant to my practice. That said, I have tried several of them, and I would be open to any of them, actually. I don't have any problem with any of them. They're all perfectly fine practices. They're not for everyone, and they're not suited for every situation. They're situational. And they need to be used carefully, because if they're used in the wrong way, then they can have harmful effects. Which is, it's interesting, actually, in the Vinaya, it says that one cannot require people to follow the Dhutangas. So if someone's living at your monastery, you can't force them to follow the Dhutangas. They have to be optional practices, because for some people it will be too much.
Bradley says, maybe we all aspire to be human in our most recent past life, fell a bit short of the pure abodes.
Well, better luck next time, except there's no such thing as luck. So better karma next time. And yes, Sally will go over that sutta in the future. So that's it for this evening. Thank you all for joining in for another session of Monk Chat. I personally find these sessions really lovely, and I find all of you really lovely. You're wonderful people.
Yes.
So may your practice go well, and we'll see you next time.
Sadhu,
sadhu, sadhu.
Ooh, and before I forget, tomorrow morning we'll have a special guest, Venerable Akaliko from Australia in the morning. And then in the evening, Bhakti Sudaso will be talking about cosmology. Is that correct?
Yes, the Buddhist Big Bang.
Wonderful. And then on Sunday, we'll start the Parami 10-day special. So all the talks will be focused on that.
Great. All right. See you next time.
Good night. Have a great